If your confidence feels fake, if your voice shakes when you want to speak up, or you keep defaulting to the nice guy script, this episode is your fucking intervention. Today, I've got a man who's not just trained minds, he's reprogrammed them with psychology, hypnosis, NLP, and years of decoding how men hold themselves back. Albert Bramante is here, professor, hypnotist, author, and we're going to dive deep on how to tear apart imposter syndrome and rebuild that version of yourself that fucking dominates. Let's start the podcast. You are listening to the Masculine Mindset Show, a podcast for men to develop a backbone, a masculine purpose, if you will, and get more physically attractive, and even become more mentally healthy. All you men listening, I turn nice introverts into fit, self-entitled savages, if you will. And you might even become a little cocky as a result of your G status. More importantly, you guys, I also show you how to flirt and date more women and seal the deal. Just look at the show notes. They are all on my blog articles. Let's get into the content. For those of you who know by now, I am a DS Labs ambassador that is Bucked Up. I do promote Bucked Up. However, this is a big announcement to all of my fitness fans right now. Listen to me, okay? I just launched a new program. However, this is not like something you can get easily. Okay, so let me tell you guys something real quick. You need to complete the full 14-day challenge in order to basically graduate to this particular program. Because listen to me, you guys, but I want to make myself very clear right now. To be clear with you, you need to know what you're getting into. That's why I have you fill out a PAR-Q intake form before you even start the free 14 days. But lastly, you guys, more importantly, before I even get into the content, just understand this. This is a German volume training program that I took all of my classmates through. That means, do me a favor and start focusing on lifting more. Because the German volume training program is not for beginners. You need to complete the full 14 days in order to qualify. All right, let's get into the content. Masculine Mindset Show. It's Adam Skoda. All right, brothers, listen to me real quick. I'm going to introduce Albert Bramante. Is that how you pronounce it, Albert?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, cool. This guy, he is basically like certified in like hypnosis, using identity shifting and stuff like that. And he's also very familiar with the film industry, you guys. And the reason I chose to bring him on is I love his work. I went to school for film, so I'm just going to have Albert introduce himself to my listeners as to what he does, and we can get started.
All right, well, thank you, Adam, for having me on. I'm really happy to be here. So my name is Dr. Albert Bramante. I have a background in psychology and NLP and hypnosis. I also represent actors for film, TV, theater, commercial, written voiceover. So I've been doing that for the past 21 years in New York City. I have an office in New York City. And it's been something I really am passionate about. I love watching new things being created, whether it's films or TV projects, and just being involved in the whole creative process is what really brings me joy.
That's great. Yeah. You know, you guys, I should say, you know, like I said, I went to school for film. A lot of people don't realize how much work is involved. Like they just don't. And you just watch it and you're like, okay, this is what I'm watching. But you don't realize what's put behind the scenes. If people look up Adam Skoda on IMDb, they will actually find a few projects that I'm on, to be clear. And this is not about me today, okay? This is about Albert. So I'm going to ask him what projects were you on. I'm just curious.
So one thing to clarify, I was a part of projects. I wasn't really on anything as far as per se. My role is to place the actor. Yeah. So I've had clients who booked, several roles in the past on Law and Order SVU. I've had clients on Blue Bloods. I had clients, who were in the Happy Gilmore sequel. That just came out on Netflix. I have clients who were, recently in the horror movie that came out, was Terrifier 3. I had a couple people on that on Netflix. So My role primarily is to supply actors for roles. So that is sort of my role in the entertainment industry, show business industry. So, and I work sometimes with filmmakers. I do have some clients on my roster that are actors and filmmakers. So, and a lot of they made a lot of indie films. Some films made it to the Tribeca Film Festival. I have a couple that made it to uh, Palm Beach Film Festival. So I do work. I represent filmmakers more than actually being a filmmaker myself. I'm not. I'm a person who
So,
represents.
got it. You represent. Now, who did you represent? Because I do. There are several filmmakers that I'm familiar with. So I want to see if he mentions one of them, you guys. So go ahead.
Let's see. Um, Oscar Thoraxelson, who I've worked with before. I work a couple local filmmakers, Niall Lynn, who made a couple of short films. I've also worked with a client, Elizabeth D'Onofrio, who made a couple of short films as well as acting in them. So I work with a lot of local filmmakers. I'm not sure at this point. What I would say is you haven't heard of them yet. So and I don't necessarily primarily I mean work with mainly actors who are sometimes filmmakers, but my 95% of my roster are just straight up actors.
Got it. All right. So I'm gonna actually tell you guys before we jump into the five parts that I want to cover with Albert. He actually found me through my episode "Why You Must Disqualify Girls," which is, I told him before the episode that's hilarious because it's such an overboard podcast, but that's how I roll. I like to combine unapologetic confidence in my podcast, and not to mention this is what it takes, you guys, to really conversing with girls too. Like Albert was that's what he wants to talk with my listeners today about. But I want him to cover that. But real quick, I wanted to ask him. I'm gonna get to part one now. Why are so many men playing small nowadays? I'll have you kind of
Well,
riff off the internal dialogue in the early conditioning.
a lot of it has to do with that because especially nowadays, especially in the past between the millennial and Gen Z population, a lot of men are maybe playing small because they're afraid to play it big. They're afraid they don't have enough courage enough to step it forward because of appearing in certain different ways. And even the media, sometimes society kind of demonizes men a little bit as being, too tough or too masculine. And so there's a stigma around being masculine. And I think that also has a lot to do with it because a term, especially what I found has been used a lot in the past 5 to 10 years, is toxic masculinity, and which I not quite sure how to really define. I mean, everybody has their own definition of that and their own concept of that. And I think a lot of men don't want to fall into that label. And so therefore they'll play it small, they'll hide a bit and not really play full on out because no one wants to be perceived as being toxic. And no one wants to be perceived as, in a negative way or a stigma attached to that.
Yeah, I'm gonna interject for 2 seconds. My thoughts on this requires a full podcast, but I should say the words toxic and masculinity, that term in my mind is toxic. So I'm gonna, this is a very, very, very large subject, so I'll just do my best to sum this up. The word toxic masculinity, or that term, puts a bad mindset on men. This is called the Masculine Mindset Show. So if you are listening to my show currently, then you already know masculinity is not toxic. I mean, sure, there's people out there that believe that, but here's my challenge to those people that believe that. if you are going to call men toxic, then that tells me you were raised by a father figure that treated you poorly, and you feel the need to project that onto everyone else. I mean, I hate to wake up your mind on that, but it's the facts. Like, you're gonna keep talking shit about masculinity, you might as well just, like, say men are toxic. But, anyways, that's my tangent on that. I could, like I said,
and that's a good point too. I think what relates to this, especially some boys that are raised without a father, stable father figure, and especially if they're raised by a mom, a single mom who may have had anger towards the father of the child. So he can grow up hearing these negative things about men from his family, from people who were supposed to be the experts in his life. I use experts in air quotes, but that can lead to, again, his own, misunderstanding what it was like to be a man. And that's why I think, some men are apologetic, what they shouldn't be, of course, we know that. They
yeah.
should be apologetic for being masculine or being a man. It's but they, a lot of times we get our scripts from our gender scripts from our parents and from society. So again, if you're raised in an environment that where either a man is absent or not valued, like let's say the father may not be treated well or even be absent. So the male who's growing up in that family is not going to have a good script to go on as far as like what it is to be a man. And the one thing obviously we don't want any male to be raised is having shame for just being a man.
hmm Yeah, you guys, I have so many articles on my website they can read on this. I would say find why men need to stop suppressing their masculinity, or like why society shames masculinity. That's the one. Look for that article. So I don't want to spend too much time on this. I would love Albert to just go down the rabbit hole on like earlier conditioning, why they play the nice guy role. I mean, as we know, like that disqualification podcast, it requires courage to even disqualify girls at all. So go ahead.
Well, there's a lot because there's a lot of stuff in, especially in the whole like Me Too movement. Now, I don't condone anyway for anyone to be disrespected or abused in any way or used in any way. But I think a lot of times with the whole men being bad scripts that we've been facing growing up and now in society, there's a lot of men become afraid to even approach girls. I mean, I was reading an article recently that a lot of even young girls were saying a lot of men don't approach him anymore.
Hmm.
And it could be, well, because they're demonized as they do. Yeah, I grew up, again, in the slightly older than most of the population. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and it was quite customary for a man to approach a girl to,
Yeah.
or to dance or to just to have that conversation. And there was no stigma attached. Now, whether she was interested, great. If not, she declined and moved on. So, but now there's a whole big approach where it's like sometimes men are demonized just for approaching or wanting to approach and talk to the opposite sex or to a female. And because of that, nobody wants to get exposed. So, therefore, I think men kind of play it safe by not doing that. And who knows what messages they're getting from their family? Because again, we get our gender scripts from first our parents, because that's our parents are really what tells us what it's like, what rules apply to being a male or a female, especially being a man. So it's really going to depend upon his relationship with his father
Mhm.
or lack thereof, which is also a problem. And that's where the conditioning can begin. And like I said, we can talk a lot about this where, um, if the man doesn't have a stable relationship with his father, he's not going to know what it's like to be a man because he doesn't get the scripts unless there's another male figure in the life, like an older brother, or a mentor, an uncle, or somebody in his life as he's a child growing up. I mean, ideally, we want the biological father to be involved in the present, but that might not always be possible as long as there's some other male. Well, it could be the grandfather, but somebody who can give that male boy a sense of what being masculine is all about and having pride in that and not looking, masculinity as a toxic or a handicap.
Mhm. Yeah, I went on a podcast. It was like guys night. This guy, no no disrespect, but like I remember him saying it's crazy. What's crazy to me is that we've gotten to a point where we need to feel like we need to hire another man to teach you how to be a man. And my first thought was, all right, I kind of see your point, but what about this massive pussification of men? That was my first thought. Men are fucking pussies. I'm not trying to sound harsh, but it's like nowadays men are just way too soft. They're just like, not only are they ordering bad food, but like they're not even like investing in their health. But not to mention, in in my mind, they're not even just like getting their internal dialogue right. And this is why I want Albert to explain the mindset, because mindset is what he does, you guys, like hypnosis and stuff like that. So go ahead.
Well, the important thing is to really develop courage, and that's the main thing too. Is develop that courage. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be the strongest fighter in the room, or the male who needs to fight everybody. But there has to be courage because that's what really is going to help the male attract women is by not being fearful.
Mm-hmm.
And what's very interesting is if you even go back to our hunter-gathering days, the man was the protector, the one that was the masculine one. Now, I'm not saying that um, women need to be protected, but they at least need an equal. If anything, somebody that can match the wit and match their courage and match their personality and match their strength and not be weak.
Yep.
And because no, one of the things you often hear is like, um, you hear women say, "I want a nice guy, I want a sensitive guy." They really don't most of the time.
Yeah.
They want someone who can be compassionate. Because I certainly think we can be masculine and compassionate at the same time and caring, but at the same time, they don't want somebody who's weak and someone who's too sensitive and ultra sensitive.
So many tangents I could say right now, but I'll keep it very fast. Guys, I have a full episode called like 10x your masculinity. And one big sum up is to call yourself out, and every single time you catch yourself being apologetic, call yourself out when you're seeking validation, call yourself out when you're seeking permission, call yourself out when you know you're playing small, as Albert has been talking about. Call yourself out if you're believing low status beliefs, because let's face it, if you believe that, like for example, masculinity is toxic, that's low status. Hate to break it to you, but it is. If you think, if you still listen to my show and you think that masculinity is toxic, you might as well stop listening to this, because that is not what my show stands for. My show stands for men stepping into their masculine edge and owning it. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to get to the second part now. Confidence isn't a feeling, it's a frame. So I'm going to have him cover this. It's not a feeling, it's a frame. I want you to talk about hypnosis now, like basically how you use that.
So the one thing with confidence is inner power.
Yeah.
So having that inner power and assurance of yourself, which is important. So the one thing that if you want to know how, like, because a lot of men will ask questions, well, how do we exceed in sales, or how do I approach women? The first thing you need to do is work on your internal state,
Yeah.
and that includes your confidence, and that includes um, even faking it to some level. So one thing that uh, is really helpful is to adopt like what we call a power pose. Where you stand up tall, legs wide, shoulders back, stomach in, and just really hold that for like 2 minutes daily. Do that. That's one thing you can physiologically start to change your state a bit. So the important thing is state control because you have the confidence is within it. It is not a thought process. It's an everyday thing. It's not like, okay, today I'm gonna wake up being confident. It takes a process to do that. It's not just a fleeting thought. And therefore, what may need be needed is there may be some deconditioning you might need. Again, if like you said, if any of your viewers feel that masculinity is toxic, that's something that has to be resolved before you can develop confidence. Is kind of to be deprogrammed from that or reprogrammed into a confident state of confidence. Because if you view masculinity as being toxic, you're being already submissive. You're coming across as being weak, and not only can women for that, but other men will pick that up too, and
Yeah.
will not treat you as an equal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing that you know about state control, you guys. I want to briefly cover this. This is covered in my dating ebook, Become the Alpha Woman Wants. It's really want to communicate this to my listeners right now. State control, in a nutshell, is you like frame controlling your mood to feel positive and not fall into the negativity bias. I heard another podcast that they can check out called like Psychological Shortcut on how women perceive your value. It's like they size you up that fast, and if you look like you're carrying yourself wrong, or like your body language is off. Again, body language is super important to women. it's it's like I can give you all the lines in the world that you want to learn, but if you have one off tone, your body language is shit. It's not attractive.
Yeah.
It's not attractive, but anything to say on that?
And that's for evolutionary reasons too. If you go back to even the whole Charles Darwinian approach of evolution, the reason why women are almost have a sixth sense, I would say, or intuitive about low confidence is because that's in order for a male to be a protector or to protect not only protect her but her kids and and his family, he's going to have that need that confidence and assurance. And that's why, like, lines and routines are great on the surface level, but if you don't have that confidence, it comes off as creepy, it comes off as inauthentic, and it's going to be the fastest turn off ever because they can tell within seconds
Yeah.
that this person's creepy,
Yeah.
this person's inauthentic, and I'm done. The conversation's over before it even began.
Yep.
And body language speaks much more stronger than what you can verbally say.
Guys, body language is like, I think, there was a study done years ago. I put it on my blog, but it's like over 70% of your own communication to women is body language. Now I suggest they find my nonverbal communication article if they want to know about that study. But yeah, this is the whole point: is confidence is a feeling. No, confidence isn't a feeling; it's a frame. And we can even cover frame control for like 2 seconds. But like, do you know anything about this frame control?
Yeah, well, it's really about mastering your state, mastering your emotions, and mastering the outcome. of the communicate, already knowing the outcome in a sense, at least the way you want to do it.
Hmm.
So you need to be in control again of everything.
Yes.
You need to be in control before you even have that. Uh, think about approaching anybody else, whether it's again, whether it's women, whether it's sales, whether it's for a job. You need that to have yourself already in check.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So next part here is imposter syndrome in the mirror. This is important because a lot of guys they do feel like they're an imposter. If you want to address this too, I think this is important. I remember you mentioned this when you reached out to me. So what are your thoughts on this? What do you use? Like I know that you're a hypnotist and author, and let my listeners know what suggestions that you have to overcome this common problem.
Well, the important thing is to stay humble. Now, imposter syndrome comes up with everybody, and the myth is that the myth of imposter syndrome is it only affects a few people. It affects everybody on some level, in some degree. The important thing is to stay grounded and to stay humble. So coming back from if we look from an NLP perspective, a lot of this happens from our early childhood. And what very often happens is when we go recalling memories in a sense that may make us feel weak or negative memories, we tend to distort, generalize, and delete.
Mm-hmm.
And so what winds up happening is we delete the good things that we've accomplished, we distort the negative, and we generalize it. And therefore, it's like I can't do anything right. I'm always a failure. And so you're distorting and you're generalizing and you're deleting the good things that you accomplish. So the one thing, and I talk about this in my book now, my book is mainly for actors, getting, reducing, eliminating self-sabotage. But the important thing is to take stock of the achievements that you have, all the good things that you've done, and keep a running file of that if you have to, keep a journal if you have to, and refer back to that because the way to rewire that is to snap back. The thoughts that are going to come in your head are not always going to be controllable. The thoughts are in control. However, the energy you spend on the thoughts is what you can control. And
Yeah.
so, therefore, just reframing, saying, okay, these are the achievements I've done. What have you done that was successful? And start taking stock into that.
Yeah. I mean, I would just have one thing to say here.
Mhm.
This this is common with many men. I mean, I look earlier in my life, I went through it myself, but I just realized that over time, I wanted to be a personal trainer, and ever since then, I just got everything I needed to basically train. And I've, long story short, I've trained several hundred people, and that that broke through that uh, imposter syndrome that I felt years ago. But I just want you guys to remember that there are several people that go through this. It's like you're not alone. So so stop acting like you're the only one going through it when everyone goes through it. I'm sure Albert went through it years ago. I mean, I'm sure we all go through it. So now it's just like developing that confidence, right? Self-love even. I think self-love is like the answer to a lot of what Albert's covering. I want to get masculine identity rewrites. And just remember, you guys, before the masculine identity rewrites, I do have my fitness courses in the show notes, so click in the show notes. But let's cover that masculine identity, rewriting your masculine identity.
Yeah, especially this is true for people that have the idea of the top. We need to reframe the toxic masculinity. That has to be rewritten. Number one, I think that's the number one thing that has to be rewritten. And to look at it, like everybody's concept of masculinity might be different, but truly all it is just that being more logical and coming from the place of strength and confidence. It doesn't mean that you cannot be compassionate. Does not mean that you have to have you're not caring. It just means that you're confident and assured. of yourself. And therefore, if you adopt that persona, that's the opposite of toxic. If you think about it, that's actually strength and courage. And but even still being admit that you can be vulnerable, and because a lot of people think when they hear the word courage, they think the absence of fear. No, it's not the absence of fear, the absence of feeling that sometimes giving into the sadness or the vulnerability. It's just owning it now and working through it.
Mm.
That's what courage really is all about.
Yeah, like I said, I have several articles on my website. One being how to take courageous action. One tip here, you guys, from me is lean just beyond your edges. If you live life in your fucking comfort zone and you're just sitting around being complacent, like that's not helping either. Like just go out there and do something outside your comfort zone. That's courage. That's what I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So, uh, so yeah, masculine identity rewrites. Yeah, I'll say one thing on this too is just remember that years ago, before anyone tried to get into your head about masculinity, I have like a whole sequence in my hardcover book on masculinity of how I just have my readers remember who they really are before they were manipulated by society. So I think that
Mm-hmm.
that would be really important for them to consider. Stop dwelling in these bad limiting beliefs that stop you from living out your best life. I mean, this is about rewiring masculinity through identity shifts and hypnosis and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to get to the very last part before we wrap up. So Albert, real quick, how can my listeners find you on and basically your website and anything like that?
Sure. So you go to my website, albertbramante.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, on Instagram, where I post a lot of content. And on my website, albertbramante.com, which is still under construction, but right now there's a lot of recordings if you want to buy them. They have different recordings in confidence, leadership, sports performance, um, addictions. So anything that you're facing, there's stuff available for everybody. So I would say definitely go to my website. Also, you can find me on Instagram and LinkedIn.
Got it. And one last thing before we wrap up. Now,
Mm-hmm.
what is your biggest tip to my listeners on confidence in improving masculinity and being more unapologetic in who they are?
The biggest thing I would say is own yourself, check yourself, and own. When I say own the room, I don't necessarily mean that you're better than everybody else, but really come with the mindset that you deserve to be here. You deserve to have a seat at the table, and that you really deserve to have your opinion. You deserve to for success, and you deserve to be happiness. Because in order for you to get happiness from other people, or other people to give you happiness, you have to give that to yourself.
Yep.
You have to love yourself.
Yeah, 1,000%. So yeah, you guys. I mean, if you feel like this podcast has helped you in any way whatsoever, I mean, obviously we know where to find Albert, and also I have my website in the show notes too. You can follow me on Instagram, and lastly, you guys, this is my one tip of confidence for me too, real quick. What Albert's saying is stuff that I'm sure that he taught many people throughout the years. I mean, he's been doing this for a very long time, and so anyone who is in the film industry knows it's a lot of work, and it does require courage too to even step on the stage to do acting. I've done acting. It's just, but it was a very long time ago. I'm not. That's not the stage in my life. I'm now just a personal trainer. But again, you guys, that's the end of my podcast for today. And if you want to work with Albert, again, you know where to find him. And yeah, just leave me a 5-star review with words behind it, because I would appreciate it. So I'm going to wrap up this podcast now.